Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Once again, this show is sponsored by Doer, built for doing. Lifestyle apparel for every occasion. And my favorite go-to are these stretch performance jeans. I'm about to show you on shopdoer.com. That's spelled D-U-E-R, by the way. These things are incredible. 20% stretch. They move with you. They are light and comfortable, and they're versatile. You can wear them around the house. You can wear them to a sporting event. You can wear them while you're working in your yard. They are built tough. They're built for doing. And right now, you can get 20% off your first order by following this URL, shopdoer.com/forever. That's right. For being a viewer of this program, you will get 20% off your first order from shopdoer.com/forever. And that's not what I want. Let's do this. How's it going, guys? Welcome back. This is becoming a habit, isn't it? I appreciate all of you tuning in and checking in. Today was a big day. No new acquisitions today, really. But today was the day that we introduced the new family and introduced some of the new players to the family and the fan base. Sam Darnold, of course, getting a chance to meet the media, as well as DeMarcus Lawrence. Marquez Valdez-Scantling wasn't here, but Josh Jones was also here to talk to the media. And my first impression of all these guys is, over the years, you follow this team, you listen to Pete Carroll for 14 years, listen to John Schneider talk about what makes a Seahawk and certain qualities that they look for. And certainly we know that, in the last 6-7 years, they began placing an even higher part of their grade and part of their decision process in acquiring players on character ever since the last straw was the Malik McDowell situation, right? And all of these guys sound like Seahawks. And it's a stark reminder that, for me, that with some free time over the next couple of days, now that free agency has kind of slowed down a little bit, there's more to come, but it's, the frenzy is over. My goodness, the last 7 days have been insane. If you haven't checked out my conversation with Jeff Simmons earlier today, watch that episode, and we kind of wrap all that up and and Jeff gives his insights on how everything's went down, and he was great as always. But it's just been a whirlwind, right? Trying to keep up with it. I mean, today was the first day I didn't set an alarm to wake up in almost 2 weeks, and it felt pretty darn good. But all these guys sound like Seahawks, and it makes me want to go, back to trying to find interviews with some of the guys that I like in the draft, because you really can't identify. I've talked about this before, but 2 years ago, heading into the draft, we knew that that edge rusher was one of the big needs. And so I was studying a lot of the edge rushers in that class. And Derek Hall's not a guy that I really got around to. I watched a little bit of tape, but for whatever reason, I just didn't feel like his game really fit what the Seahawks might be looking for. his tape didn't really speak to me. But I never watched an interview with him or found out about his story. If I had known who Derek Hall was and what he went through in his life to get to where he is today, I would have had him in every single mock draft I ever did. And so I need to find those guys this year, because these guys, Josh Jones, sounds like a Seahawk, right? DeMarcus Lawrence. Oh my goodness. Shout out to Hawk blogger Brian Nemhauser, friend of the show. He got one of the best sound bites I think anyone's gotten out of a Seahawk player in a very long time. Where he was talking about DeMarcus, about what it's like to move on after 10 years with one team. Like a lot of players in the NFL these days it's pretty rare to spend 10 years with one team. And he talks about how it was time to move on because he'll never win a Super Bowl there. And already, like, that thing has taken off to the point that Micah Parsons has shot back and clapped back at DeMarcus in a pretty childish way, I thought. And then DeMarcus kind of put him in his place. I thought that was great. And then just before I hit live, NFL Network actually has tweeted it and made a story out of it. So good job, Brian. That was good stuff. And Lawrence just sounds like everything you want in a football player and a Seahawk. Couple of impressions from all of that. Lawrence really stood out today, I thought. The intensity that he plays with on the field comes out in his personality when he's not playing football too. Like, he's a dog. You hear that term thrown around a lot with him. He was a guy that earlier in his career, he had some immaturity issues. There were some character concerns coming out of Boise State because of that. And then he reached a point in his career where he became known as a clubhouse leader and a mentor to young players. I think that's one of the big reasons he was brought in here, because that defense is just so young outside of Leonard Williams. And also for his run defense, as good a pass rusher as he's been, almost 70 sacks in his career. Of course, he had those two big, huge years in 2017 and 18 back-to-back with double-digit sacks. And then Micah Parsons came along and he kind of shifted into a secondary role where he was very consistently averaging 6-7 sacks a year. His career average is 7.5 sacks. But he's an elite run defender on the edge. And when you look at what his role will be, it's no surprise that, Draymond Jones gets released and Lawrence is the guy to take his place, because that was Jones' role. He was supposed to set the edge. They never asked Jones really to drop into coverage like they would with Mafe, Nwosu, not as much with Derek Hall. But it's one of the reasons they moved off of Darrell Taylor, right? Got to be able to set the edge and play the run. Watch DeMarcus Lawrence's run defense tape, and it's more fun than watching his pass rush tape. Like, he is, I saw a rep today where he was in goal line and he beat two blockers in goal line, right? When you only have about a foot to work with, beat two blockers individually to get to the running back and stop him short of the goal line. Like, he is a tenacious run defender. He did say today he is fully healthy. That foot is fully healed, and he believes he has a lot left in the tank. So just seems like a great match, and I can't wait to see him and how that addition works kind of in concert with everything else they have on defense. Josh Jones was really, really a pleasure to listen to. Love his attitude. He's got a quiet confidence about him. He talks about how he started at every position except center. So he has that versatility. Make no mistake about this, though. As much as everybody is stressing out about the guard position, he was drafted as a tackle, was supposed to be a franchise left tackle. Taken in the third round, but he had franchise upside. He was a little raw coming out of Houston, but it was the athletic profile that really attracted teams to him. He was brought in to be a swing tackle, right? It was something I talked about a week or two ago. They let Stone Forsythe go, George Fant go. Fant never really worked out because of the injury. But that if I'm building a 53-man roster today in the NFL, that's a role on the roster that I absolutely want to fill. I don't want a backup left tackle and a backup right tackle. I want a guy that can play both. I think it's really important. And he can. He's still just 27 years old. You see all the research and all the data about how offensive linemen, more so than any other position, really, it takes 4 or 5 years for them to really reach their peak. I saw a chart last week. I should have saved it so I could show it to you. I think it was based on PFF grades, which, say what you will about those, but at least it's a marker. And the chart just went like this. And it was PFF grades by year for offensive linemen. Offensive linemen that start every game, that start as early in their career, not, the score wasn't going up because they didn't play as rookies and then they started to play more. It's just a general trend, which certainly makes you optimistic about Charles Cross and his timeline. And then all the young guys that we have on the roster that are offensive linemen. We're going to talk about that in a second. And so Josh Jones, 27 years old, he was at Arizona for a while. And so, questionable development there. They fired their entire coaching staff. That was a kind of a dysfunctional organization, always sort of has been, but it's not sure he got the greatest coaching or the greatest opportunity there. And then he goes to Baltimore, right? I mean, one of the healthiest organizations in the league where, outstanding coaching staff and they've always had really good offensive lines there. So really, really bullish on his upside as well. Maybe even potentially an answer if they should choose not to extend Abe Lucas at the end of this year. All right. Like, don't get me wrong. If Abe Lucas has a healthy season and he looks like rookie Abe Lucas, I absolutely want them to extend him. But if the knee should be bulky again at any point, or if it just appears at some point that he just isn't the player that he was, maybe Josh Jones is an answer there. So really, really cool there. And then Sam Darnold. Have you ever seen a Seahawks quarterback sit down for a press conference wearing flannel? That got a lot of attention today. He's obviously fitting right into the Northwest. Don't know if he's bought a Subaru yet, but perhaps that's coming. If he had on a trucker hat with a mesh back, I would have thought that he lived in Enumclaw. And I joke about that, but I spent a couple of years working at a bar in Enumclaw, and every single male resident of that town wears that as their daily uniform. So, fitting right in. And I thought it was really refreshing. My biggest takeaway, I have two big takeaways from Darnold's press conference. One was just how laid back and easygoing and humble he is. That's something we're not used to seeing from Seahawks quarterbacks over the last 15 years, is it? I'm not saying that Russell Wilson, Geno Smith didn't have good personalities. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying that, both of them had chips on their shoulders for different reasons, but massive chips. It's what drove them. It's really what wired them and what made them into the players that they were. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that it's, and Russell was tough to listen to in press conferences just because he was so robotic. Smith was tough to listen to sometimes because I felt like that chip just showed through. He always wanted to talk about people counting him out, whatever. I thought the way Sam sat up there and just talked about what a great opportunity he thought this was, talked about the perspective that the struggles he's gone through in his career have led him to where he is today. And then the second thing was how honest he was about his trajectory and some of his weaknesses and failings over the years. And I thought the biggest thing that stood out for me was this. Because what have you heard about Sam Darnold since he was acquired? Even though he's a good athlete, and he can move around, he can get out and run. His ability to manage a messy pocket when protection breaks down was concerning. And mostly because what sticks out in people's minds is the playoff loss to the Rams, when that tenacious young defensive line that really clicked in about halfway through the season last year was going to give anyone issues, gave the Philadelphia Eagles problems, even in the snow. That he just didn't perform well in that game or the regular season finale the week before it for the same reasons. And his ability and willingness to sit there today and say, yeah, I have to get better at that. And particularly, like, I have to get better at, and he talked about how he has gotten better at it over his career, certainly compared to his performance in New York, but even Carolina, where interceptions were a little bit of a bugaboo, that, I got to know when to eat it on third down if it's not there, or have to know when to just settle for the check down and take the escape route. Well, what stood out to me about that was, if this had all happened last year with Ryan Grubb, there were no escape routes. For all the fans that like to rip Geno for holding the ball too long last year, at times. There wasn't any other place to go with it. Like Ryan Grubb was just kind of all or nothing in a lot of his pass plays. Big, slow, developing deep shots woven into a lot of his pass plays. And whereas Clint Kubiak, and he's talked openly about this, but part of his scheme is every single play, every single pass play has an escape hatch in it, a hot route, an easy read, somewhere to get rid of the ball in a hurry if you have to when things break down. And he talked about how he has to get better at that. I thought that was great. I really did. Talked about the scheme fit, his familiarity with Kubiak. It was really, really interesting. And then we got to hear from John Schneider today and Mike McDonald. John went on his radio show again and brought McDonald with him. And what was great, I mentioned this in the comments during the live feed. It was one of the more enjoyable of those shows I've ever watched. You know, even though I appreciate that show, Schneider's been doing it for 3 years during draft season. He does it up through the draft. Then he kind of goes into hiding a little bit until the season starts. Sometimes he tries to be as transparent as he can, and I appreciate that about him. But obviously, there's things he's not going to talk about. I thought today, with McDonald there, he just seems so much more comfortable. You see the chemistry between those guys. Like I got to witness it up close about 2 weeks after McDonald was hired. And you could tell even then that those guys really clicked. They were really on the same page. Personality-wise, even. Just they're both kind of nerdy and dorky and have silly senses of humor. You can see why they got along so well and clicked in that interview process and why John moved so swiftly to hire him. So that was fun today. And then John talked pretty openly. I always and this is the reporter in me. This is the old reporter in me where I remember how difficult it was sometimes to ask a tough question, a question that you knew the subject didn't really want to answer, but you had an obligation to ask it as a reporter. And this had to be a tough week for John. Like, I think people lose sight of the fact that these are real people. Everybody wants to fire him, right? Fire the guy, make him move his family to another city, a family that he raised here, 2 sons and his wife, Tracy. And, one of the sons, with very open, John is with his foundation and everything, about autism and just fire him. This is his dream job. This is where he wants to spend the rest of his life. But, we don't care. All I care about is my football team. People forget these guys are humans. And what I mean by that is, or I guess the point I'm getting at, there was a session with John off podium, sort of like they do at the combine after the press conference, because he wasn't sitting down for the press conference. It was Clint Kubiak, Mike McDonald, and Sam Darnold. But he gave the local media an opportunity to talk to him. And I thought it was pretty raw. Like you could tell sometimes John doesn't hide his true feelings very well. And you could tell when he was asked about the Geno Smith thing and how negotiations broke off and they didn't get a chance to counter, he wasn't hiding his emotions very well. He was pissed and he was hurt. He was upset. They wanted to keep Geno Smith. These players mean something to him. He wanted to keep DK Metcalf too. But in particular, I saw a very familiar tone and look on his face. It reminded me of when he talked about the Russ thing, because he and Mark Rodgers, man, they really butted heads. I keep meaning to look at Rodgers' complete roster of clients, because I've always thought if any free agents' names are on there, they're not coming to Seattle. I don't think John Schneider would ever mess with a Mark Rodgers client again. But I think Rodgers, most of his roster is baseball players. I think Russ was one of the first and maybe still one of the only clients that he had in the NFL. But those negotiations got really, really, really contentious. Like I have some insight into some first-person witnesses that were in the room when he was talking to Rodgers on the phone during that last negotiation for Russ's last contract, and it was nasty. So he certainly wasn't hiding that today. He's disappointed. But the way they were able to pivot to Sam Darnold was pretty impressive. And I think some work had obviously gone into that ahead of time. But also, and Jeff Simmons and I talked about this a little bit today, it was a rare opportunity. Like, if this had happened in any other year, the outcome may have been very different. either they just wouldn't have given in to Geno's demands and just not traded him and hoped that by training camp he would report or play by week 1 and, call their bluff and kind of hold him to that. Or they would have gone ahead and done the trade. And then what? Like Brandon Allen, you're going to give $40 million to Justin Fields? Hell no. Aaron Rodgers? Hell no. Russ wasn't coming back. Like there just weren't in a normal free agent year. There's no quarterbacks. Jeff and I were talking about it today. There's usually guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston, and Fitzpatrick obviously retired, but he was a guy that seemingly the last 5 or 6 years of his career was a free agent every year. And if somebody needed to plug a leaky hole, they would just call Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? Guys like Sam Darnold they're just not available. So to be able to pivot to that quickly, present their case and convince Darnold this was the best place for him, which there was going to always be a natural fit anyway for him because he spent a year with Kubiak in San Francisco and because the O'Connell McVay influenced scheme is born out of the same DNA as the Shanahan and Kubiak scheme, right? And so I thought that was really cool. And it's hard, no matter how much you are concerned, stressed about the big picture and the roster as a whole and the offensive line and all of that. If you didn't watch all of that today and come away feeling kind of geeked and excited, then you might just need to take a break from sports and just check out for a little while, maybe come back to it. Because at the end of the day, the name on the front of the jersey is going to last a lot longer than the name on the back of the jerseys. And I've spent so many thousands of dollars on jerseys. I can empathize with all of you when players move on that you care about. I get it. It makes sense. And I feel the same way, but it just, I'm excited after today. Now let's get to the offensive line. Then we'll get to comments and questions and all of that. John was asked about it and I thought he handled the questions really well. And, here, let me pull up this actual quote. I think it was Michael Sean Dugar, who posted it. I thought it was really great. Yeah, it was Michael Sean. I'm just going to read it to you. I could put it on the screen. It'd be too small anyway. So in talking about the offensive line, right? He had already mentioned, this isn't in the quote, but he acknowledged without naming his name that they went hard after a big time offensive lineman. He was talking about Will Fries. And he acknowledged some of the reporting out there that they wanted to bring him in for a physical. This is what Bob Condota reported the other day. They wanted to bring him in for a physical. This is something I speculated about a couple of days ago before he rejected the Seahawks offer and signed with the Vikings, that when it got late in the day Monday, I said, hey, they probably would want to have him in for a physical because that broken leg was so severe. And so this might not get done till Wednesday. Well, I was right about that part. What I didn't anticipate is that some team would come along and go, you know what? We don't care. We'll tack 2 more years on. We'll give you $30 million more dollars. No physical. We'll send you the offer right now. You can sign it. It's binding. We're good to go. We'll just take the chance. It's a huge gamble on Minnesota's part. It could work out, and Will Fries could have all pro seasons over the life of the contract and be everything the Seahawks would have been hoping he was and everything the Vikings are hoping he is. But it's a huge risk and a huge gamble, and not one that everyone would take. Again, I would remind you, there has been only one 5-year contract given out this free agency period in the 130, 140 contracts that have been agreed to already. One 5-year contract and only 6 4-year contracts. This 2 and 3 year contract thing is a league-wide trend. It's not just Sean Schneider. So he had already addressed that, right? Wanted to have him in for a physical. He said, nope, I want to know now. And I have this other offer, and they wouldn't budge. And I don't blame them for that. And this is what he said then to follow that up. Does that mean you start panicking and throwing money at other guys that aren't quite as good? No, Schneider said. You make the smart, patient decision. We've made decisions in the past that haven't been the best decisions for the organization because we weren't patient and we panicked, and we pay for that. Schneider said Seattle is still working on acquiring a veteran offensive lineman, but also noted that the new offensive staff likes the young players on the roster. During the radio interview, McDonald said, although they're pursuing veteran free agents and scouting draft prospects, they expect their returning offensive linemen to improve and contribute in 2025. We want to address it, but offensive line coach John Benton and run game coordinator Rick Dennison are experts, and they like our young guys, Schneider said. They like them. They see growth. They see positive development, positive futures with them. But it's an area we want to address, and we tried addressing it, and sometimes it doesn't work out. I responded to this on Twitter. I agree with every word of this statement. And if you don't agree with it and you don't think it makes sense, then I think your emotion is just clouding reason, because you just want it to be done. You want it to be done today. The uncertainty is what drives us crazy, right? I was talking to somebody about that today. It's why are we so impatient? It's just because the unknown is scary. The unknown can be sexy too. And that's why, some people are like, well, they should have just drafted a quarterback, which is what they would have had to do if Darnold wasn't available, per my previous point. Well, what's the track record of that, right? That's a slippery slope. Having to rely on that is, anyway. But everything they say here, they took a shot at a really good lineman, someone they had graded very highly. In draft terms, if you want to use an analogy, they're sitting there at 18. There's a player, they're on deck. They're not on the clock. Whoever's 17th drafting in front of us is there. And there's a player the Seahawks absolutely want. He's at the top of their board. He's the last first-round grade they have left. They're all sitting around anticipating. They're like, they try to trade up with that team, but the team says, nope, we're sticking and picking. And they're crossing their fingers. This is a guy that we think is going to be a transformative player, and the team ahead of him picks him. So you're sitting at 18, all your first round grades are gone. You have nothing but second round grades. You panic and take the next best guy at that spot, and sometimes it doesn't work out. LJ Collier's a great example of that, right? They were so hyper-focused that year on, we need an edge player. We need an edge player. We just traded Frank Clark. We need an edge. We missed out. We traded down and we missed out on all these edges. We didn't think we were going to be taken that high. We got to take the next best edge, and look what happened. What they should have done that year is just taken the best, highest rated player on the board at another position. And so where a lot of fans think, well, when they lost out on Fries, they should have just immediately gone and signed Mekhi Becton or Tevin Jenkins. Well, if they don't have them graded that high, and they don't have, I use this word a lot, they don't have conviction that player is going to start from day one and make them better than what they have on hand, then they're not going to throw the same money at those people. Now, Schneider said Seattle's working on acquiring a veteran offensive lineman. And McDonald said, where did he say? McDonald says, although they're pursuing veteran free agents and scouting draft prospects, they are still working on veteran options. Now, it might be someone like Lucas Patrick, right, who I've talked about as an Evan Brown level player, 30 years old, played guard and center, has played well, but he's not an elite player by any means. Probably wouldn't start. If you see that they've signed Lucas Patrick, he's your super sub, and he's that veteran influence that this team sorely lacks. He's a guy to come in OTAs and training camp and teach the young guys the scheme, because he played for Kubiak last year in New Orleans. He would be, that's the influence that they valued so much last year from Laken Tomlinson, so much so they left him out there for 17 games, even though he wasn't playing very well, because that line is just too damn young. That's the mistake they really made, is they should have, over the last 3 or 4 years, sprinkled in a solid vet or two. The line's too young. It takes too long to come together. Ray Roberts tweeted today to, hang in there, because there's a lot of guys on this line that we like. Ray was talking specifically about Christian Haynes. He says, I think he's ready to go. And I think he's a starter, and he's going to be really good. Does that make you feel better? I mean, this is a guy that knows a little bit more about offensive line play than most of us fans, all of us fans. So it does indicate they're still working on it. And there have been reports that Seattle is still in on Tevin Jenkins. When I watched the live feed of the Darnold interview, it was unbelievable to me. It's so hard to, I had to close that box after a while, because There's some people, I don't know if they're bots or not, or they just have no lives. There's a couple accounts that all they do the entire press conference is just type fire John Schneider, fire John Schneider, fire John Schneider. There was another one that just kept saying sign offensive lineman, sign offensive lineman, sign offensive lineman. I get it, but you need a new bit. And then a lot of people were like, sign Tevin Jenkins yesterday. Sign Tevin Jenkins. Tevin Jenkins is far from a perfect player. He has a lot of good reps on tape, and he's a good fit for the scheme, but he certainly wasn't someone the Chicago Bears tried to retain. In fact, they went out and traded for 2 guards and spent millions of dollars on a center because they didn't want him anywhere near the roster. There's injury issues there, and part of it, one of the ongoing issues he's had is a back issue, and that's very concerning. So if you can get Tevin Jenkins at the right price, maybe one of those like a George Fant deal, right? Like the 2-year deal or the Noah Fant deal even, where the second year salary is pretty substantial, but the first year you're protecting yourself a little bit. Like what if this guy shows up and he can't play? So he's not a slam dunk. Okay, well then just sign Mekhi Becton like he played for John Benton in New York. Yeah, so John Benton saw him flame out as a high draft pick bust. And yeah, while he put some reps on tape with the Eagles last year where he's pancaking guys. He's 360 pounds. There's a lot of bad reps too, particularly in pass protection. And he benefited from playing between Cam Jurgens and Lane Johnson, 2 of the best in the league. So just about anybody could step in there and look good. So again, Becton might be on their radar. It might be one of these guys they're talking about. And I do think they'll get something done with one of these guys. But if they sign Tevin Jenkins tomorrow, I am not going to come on here and tell you that they've fixed their offensive line. They've found their left guard, because I won't believe that. They still need to hit it in the draft. And this is a very, very good draft class. So that's kind of, I appreciated that McDonald and Schneider were willing to talk about that so openly. I really was. And I think it was probably good that they got the off podium stuff out of the way first, because he was clearly irritated, but he was having a good time when he sat down with those guys. Let me just check before I get to you. Let me check Twitter and just see if there's any breaking news. By the way, anytime I'm doing one of these live shows, if there is breaking news that you see, hit it in the comments so I don't miss it. Because, that's always, a concern. Let's see. Yep. Oh, good. I wanted to mention this. So we talked about Garrett Bradbury last night, and Jeff Simmons and I talked about Garrett Bradbury today as an option. And Jeff went into some detail about it. And we both agreed, because Brock Heward did a big post about this yesterday and talked about it on his show with Brock and Salk on Seattle Sports, about how, Garrett Bradbury is available now. Former first-round pick, center. I think he's played some guard, but mostly a center for the Vikings, because they went out and signed Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. And so it was only a matter of time. And Brock was saying, look, they'll probably release him, but why not, avoid the risk of someone else swooping in and getting him and just offer him a 7th-round pick, right? Let me look up. Well, then about an hour, as this usually happens, about an hour after Jeff and I talked, before I could even get the episode uploaded, there he is. Wait a minute. Okay. They released Garrett Bradbury. So, gosh darn it. I'm trying to find, hang on, you guys. Hold on. Because I want to be able to, I don't want to guess at this. Okay. Nope. I can't find it. Why can't I find it? Bear with me. I just had a Mike Myers moment pop into my head, discuss. The Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor a revolution. Discuss. Hang on. Appreciate you sticking with me, guys. All right. Garrett Bradbury. Okay. So he is, I think he's 30, 29, right? So that'd be promising. Former first-round draft pick center, 29 years old. They just released him. He's on the open market. Let's go get him. Well, Garrett Bradbury never lived up to his first-round draft pick status. Never did. John Ledyard, who does such a great job, formerly of the, was he Draft Network? Anyway, now he does Substack. He was talking about how he thought Bradbury was a really, really almost elite prospect coming out of college. And he admitted that he overlooked some of the concerns. He thought there were some red flags, but he just thought the tape was so good. He was such a good player that he ignored the red flags. He has a very slight lower half, doesn't have a big, thick, heavy base, and he's had some issues with power. And you could see it in his grades. Like 2019, his rookie year. Overall PFF and PFF grades, I always have to give this disclaimer. They're not the, the be all end all. Some people don't agree with them at all, but it's a marker, right? His overall grade as a rookie, 58.1. And in particular, struggles as a pass blocker. Run block grades are okay. And they have been consistently throughout his career. And it's, in fact, you see steady improvement. But as a pass blocker, 2022, he was a 68.1. But every other year, my goodness, 38.7, 38.8, 43.7, 48.2. 48.2 was last year. So you talk about that internal pressure that Darnold had in those last couple of games. And that's why, that points out the concerns with him and he doesn't handle pressure well. Well, Bradbury was he was involved in that. His run block grades, like I said, are okay. But he never lived up to his first round status. The best year he ever had in the eyes of PFF, 2022, he had a 70.2 overall score, and his run block was 72.4, and his pass block was 68.1. He's barely 300 pounds, 6'3", 300 pounds, not the biggest dude in the world. So here's my thing with Bradbury. I think they should sign him. I think they will sign him. You also, it was reported today that he and Darnold, in the 1 year that Darnold was in Minnesota, became very close. And he trusts Bradbury and respects him implicitly. So getting your new franchise quarterback, his center, never a bad idea. The money has to be right. And in my opinion, a 1 year deal makes sense. I don't know what the number is. People always ask, like, what pick would you trade for that guy? Or how much would you pay him? I don't know, because I'm not in that room. I don't know what other plans they have. I don't know the structure of the deal. I guess just off the top of my head, though, anything over like $5 million, no, thank you. Maybe the contract they gave Connor Williams last year, 1 year up to $6 million. I think it was a $4 million deal, but he could earn $6 million with play time. And if he played well enough to start all 17 games and play well. A deal like that would make sense because of the familiarity in the scheme, right? To teach these other young guys. I still think even if that were to happen, he's not the 17-game starter if he starts at all. I still like Jalen Sundell as the long-term starter, but I think Oluwatimi's probably the favorite in the clubhouse to start week 1. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think it'll come to fruition sometime in the next couple of days. But if they sign him, don't think, aha, we have our center. Because I actually would be more concerned if he did start week 1 than if he didn't. So that's how I feel about that particular thing. All right, let's see what you got, guys. What's up, everybody? Feed me more sharks. Thank you for the $2 donation. You see Parsons and Lawrence clash on Twitter. Yeah, that was fun. If you guys haven't checked it out, just look up DeMarcus Lawrence on Twitter first. And then you'll see it. Or Micah Parsons, either one. It's childish, but it's also kind of fun. I'm sure those guys are cool with each other, but they're competitors. It happens, right? All right. Let's see. All right, here's a little draft note from Hawk Lad. I like how he trademarked it. That's nice. I should do that. I should look into trademarking Seahawks Forever. I want Teteroa McMillan, and I'll end myself if we don't somehow get him. So there's only one player in this draft that you're okay with drafting at 18, just one? Let me say this about Tet McMillan. There's a reason that he used to be routinely mocked in the top 10, and now he's not. And now he's some who think he might not even be in the first round. I don't think he's done himself any favors not testing. It'll be interesting to see when his pro day, how his pro day goes. Let's look that up. When is Arizona pro day? I had the whole pro day schedule. Let's see. Here it is. Pro day schedule. Arizona. March 18th through the 21st. The Big 12 does all their schools in one location. Is that right? Exact dates to be. So it'll be in some range next week between the 18th and the 21st. So McMillan needs to test. His tape's not perfect. There's examples on tape of him running lazy routes, not coming back to the ball hard, in particular when he's not the primary. I mean, that's kind of what we didn't like about DK sometimes, right? But he's 6'5", and he's got that huge catch radius. I get it. If you think about the Kubiak scheme, the Shanahan-McVay scheme, what does it place a premium on? Route running. Route running. You don't need to be the biggest guys. Look at what they had. Look at Ayuk and Debo and Ricky Pearsall. Then you go to LA and you look at Cooper Kupp and Puka and Robert Woods and all the guys that have excelled there, like 6'2", 6'3" tops. They're great route runners. That's more of a premium. I honestly don't think Tet McMillan is going to grade out very high on their board. And then if they're looking at 18 and they're looking at their board and the top guys, there's a wide receiver at the top of their board, best player available, right? I don't think it's going to be Tet McMillan. I think Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka would have way more appeal to them because they're technicians as route runners. You want a bigger receiver? Jaden Higgins. Much better route runner than Tet McMillan. Now, I'm not saying I'd be pissed if they took him because then they obviously think he would be a fit. But just because he's tall, there's more to the story than that. So, this is kind of an interesting comp. Like Arcega-Whiteside was a specimen coming out of Stanford. I think he was even bigger, 6'6". And, he just absolutely murdered the Cougs with high point 50-50 balls, just contested catches. He lived on those things all day long. I'd rather wait till the second round and take Jack Besh or Jaden Higgins than Tet McMillan at 18. That's just me, and I'm not done. I don't have my final study. I'll do my wide receiver rankings and everything as we get closer. We'll talk more about this, but yeah. Brandon Thomas says the reason you move on from DK is to shift resources away from wide receiver to other areas of the team. Don't understand why you'd turn around and invest your best draft capital back in a wide receiver because a rookie contract is way less than you're paying DK. You're talking about the 18th pick or lower if they trade down. That's so affordable. You have to keep adding receivers. First of all, you got to layer them so that, JSN comes up for his massive contract. You've got a couple other guys on rookie deals that are contributors as your wide receiver 2 and 3. I think you have to take shots on wide receivers every year. Don't be surprised if a wide receiver is the pick in the first round. Now, if I'm a betting man, I'm still betting trenches. I think it's going to be a trench draft emphasis. I really do. And there are receivers I like better on day 2 when they have those extra picks. So I'm perfectly fine. And actually my preference right now is to either go defensive tackle or obviously interior offensive line in the first round and wait till day 2 to address wide receiver, maybe quarterback, maybe corner, but continue to hammer the trenches, especially in the top 100 when we have 5 picks, because it's such a good draft class on both sides of the ball through the top 100. So that's my approach. But I'm not going to be mad if they take someone they think can be a blue chip, a high level receiver and a dangerous weapon in the first round. Not at all. Dogzilla Monster, what's up? After all these months of offensive line free agency BS, what the hell are we? You mean like style, like identity? They're working on it. It's yet to be set. I do want to remind you again of what Ray Roberts today said, because I thought it was really cool in that it really backed up, what I've been talking about for a month now, is we have so many young offensive linemen that we've drafted in the last 2 years, 4 years, really, when you include Cross and Lucas. I've already talked about how they take the longest to develop and how lines take the longest to put together because of continuity. Ryan Grubb did them no favors last year. They were among the tops in the league at leaving their tackles on an island. Is that a responsible choice when for much of that period, your tackles were Michael Jarrell and Stone Forsyth? Like that's irresponsible. Not helping him with tight ends, not helping him with 12 personnel, under center, play action. Like that's just negligent. But also just the fact that they're just so dang young. If you took Christian Haynes, Satawa Lamea, I would even put Anthony Bradford in there, although I don't think he's a fit for this new scheme, and I think that there's a chance that maybe they try to trade him for a late pick or something. Olu Oluwatimi, Jalen Sundell, and you put those guys in this draft against this draft class, they're going to grade out very, very well. Christian Haynes is going to be in the top 100. I think, Jalen Sundell, if you can include what he's done in the pros, I think he would with his athletic profile. I think Lamea, wouldn't be top 100, but he would grade out favorably against these guys. And so you just want to give up on them already and go with new and young and unknown again? Schneider said Benton and Dennison love the young players we have. Roberts talked about how this scheme is going to be much more forgiving and favorable to these young linemen, and he said the same things. You can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, is the old saying, right? Those guys are still going to develop. They're still going to hit. Nobody knew who Will Fries was a month ago, and he didn't start his career out great. He didn't really pop until last year, and then he broke his foot or his leg. Same with Tevin Jenkins. Didn't start out his career great. Garrett Bradbury, high first-round draft pick, stunk early in his career. Like, these guys develop, right? So the answer isn't to replace them all. It's just not. And so I think we're still trying to figure out what the identity is, but I've been saying this, they need one more dude. Okay. Someone that comes in and just brings some identity, like an ass kicker, like someone nasty, right? Charles Cross is kind of laid back. Abe Lucas is quiet, although he's sort of that type of player just in the way he plays, his play demeanor. Christian Haynes is quiet. Like, these guys play nasty, but they don't act nasty. And that's why I think they need to add one of those guys. I think they thought Will Fries fit that because you see it on the tape anyway. Like, that's how he plays. You could see why they thought, okay, that guy fits. There are some guys like that in this draft. I think Tyler Booker is so much that way that if he's still there at 18 or even 15 or 16, they might consider bumping up a little bit to get him, even though he's not a perfect scheme fit because he's a little bit bigger, kind of lumbering, mauler. Although I thought in the actual movement drills at the combine, that changed my mind. When you see him run the 40 and you see him jump and everything, you go, ooh, I don't know if he can handle wide zone, get to the second level. But then you saw him do the wave drill and some of those bag drills and stuff. You're like, that works. But he's so nasty. He brings a demeanor. He's known as like an elite next level leader. Okay, we need a guy like that. If you don't do that in the first round or you miss out on him, the next guy that fits that mold for me is Gray Zabel. The next guy after that fits that mold for me is Tate Ratledge, who I think you can get at 50. Just nasty, has that demeanor. I think Jackson Slater exhibits some of those qualities. So they need to add that guy. Not just a good player who like is assignment sound and gets out and, knows how to position his body. And they need a guy that's nasty to help bring that together. I really believe that. Here we go. Kevin Dilly. I still think Cooper Kupp is signing with the Seahawks tonight or early tomorrow. Let's talk about Cooper Kupp. When it first became evident that he was done with the Rams, I thought, well, everyone's going to want him on the Seahawks. And of course, this was before DK was traded and Tyler was released. I just didn't think he was a fit. He's not an outside guy and he can't take the top off. He's a slot guy. The more I look at it, the more I think about it. I do think he fits. First of all, I think they're going to use JSN more on the outside. Kubiak doesn't go 3 wide receivers very often. He just does the 2. And so some of those slot responsibilities are taken up by tight ends because he runs a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. JSN only ran about 20% outside last year. I think they're going to do more of that with him, and I think they can in this scheme, which gives that opportunity for Kupp to work the inside. And even though, you look at the numbers and like I saw some advanced stats today about like ability to get open, and you could see as his career went along, the injuries taking their toll, right? They just like the percentages just kept getting lower and lower and lower. But he can still catch the ball in traffic. He's one of the hardest workers on the planet, and he's one of the best blocking wide receivers of all time. Like, he's essentially a tight end. And so, we got some reports today that according to some teams, he wants to stay on the West Coast. Okay, that eliminates 28 of the teams. And that he's probably looking for a contract in the neighborhood of $12 to $14 million. Well, with his injury history, that makes me a little nervous. But I have confidence that if he really wants to be here, and I talked about this last night, he didn't grow up a Seahawk fan. He loved the entire NFL. He owned many jerseys from many different teams. His dad played for the Saints, or not his dad. Was his dad or his uncle? His uncle played for the Saints, or grandfather. He had a Saints jersey, he had a Cowboys jersey, but his family are all diehard Seahawks, and they live in Yakima. And so there's no state income tax in Washington. His family can drive an hour and a half and get to the stadium. That's got to have some pull. And so if he's willing to be creative in how the contract is structured and have some incentives built into it, then I'm all in on Cooper Kupp. And also, the Seahawks had money earmarked for Will Fries. A lot of money. It would have been the biggest contract they've ever given to an offensive lineman ever. That money has to go somewhere. Some of it went to DeMarcus Lawrence, but not all of it. I know. They can absolutely fit Cooper Kupp in. If it's more than a 1-year deal, if they do one of those 1-year $12 million, I'll be less excited about it because that just eats up all that space. But how can you not get excited about Cooper Kupp, right? Watching him at Eastern Washington, watched him destroy my Cougs, and then, wanting him in the draft and watching the Rams take him right before, I thought the range that we would maybe take him, and then watching him beat us and kill us for years. Like, it might heal some of those wounds having him on the team. So I think there's a good chance. The encouraging thing, to your point, Kevin, and I appreciate the comment, to your point, it's also been reported that he doesn't want this to drag out. He wants to figure out his future soon. So I do think we could find something out within the next day or two. I do. So that could be a lot of fun. Okay, Sean says he did like the Seahawks until around age 8 or 9. Yeah, Kupp for Bobo works for me. That's essentially the role he would take. Here's how I would see the wide receiver room kind of shaking out. Let's say, just pick someone, right? Like the guys that I like in the second round. Let's say it's Jaden Higgins or Jack Besh. Your wide receiver room would be JSN, Jaden Higgins. Well, let's say Jack Besh. I kind of like him better. JSN, Jack Besh, Cooper Kupp. Those are your top 3. MVS is really your Jake Bobo, and then Bobo's your 5th. That's a pretty solid room, I think. I think Bobo's another guy that might have a little more success in the scheme because he can essentially be a big slot or a tight end along with Kupp. And so maybe tight ends, if you sign Kupp, maybe tight end isn't as massive of a need, despite the fact that they want to run a lot of 12 and 13, and it's a really good tight end draft class because you can kind of line those guys up in those bunch formations, close, those tight formations, and let them eat. But also in that scenario I just painted, Bobo would have to make the team. He'd have to come out and have a really good camp and make the club. Speaking of tight end, I thought it was really interesting. Schneider was asked today, you have cap space, but now you've signed some guys. Are there any other moves impending or pending to clear more cap space? And he said, we'll see how things go. We'll see how the rest of free agency and the rest of the offseason goes, but not right now. No. Really encouraging for me. It's because we're talking about Uchenna Nwosu and Noah Fant here. Nwosu's got the $21 million cap hit, and they agreed. They had the bonus they were going to pay, and both sides mutually agreed to hold off on that. And then Noah Fant's got the last year of his deal, and he's got a $13.4 million cap hit. And I've been saying all along, like, he's not going to play on that. They're going to adjust it, extend him if he's a fit, or maybe release or trade him. Well, now, you don't have to do those things. And I actually like that. Like, let Noah Fant play on the last year of his deal if it doesn't inhibit you from signing anyone else. And basically, Schneider said today, if it did, that they would change it. They would fix it, right? But also, remember what happened a couple of years ago with DK Metcalf's last big extension. That didn't happen until right before training camp. And at the time, they were out of cap space. So they waited knowing that they could make that move. They've done that before also with some of those automatic triggers that they use where you can change, you can convert a player's salary to a bonus and clear cap space that way. That's written into the contract. The player doesn't have to agree to that. And they know they have those triggers available to them. They could do that with Leonard Williams' deal as well. So if you see them go out in the next couple of weeks and max out and spend all their cap space, and you think, what are we going to do now? Like, don't freak out, because they still have those other levers to pull if they had to pay for their draft class, injury reserve, practice squad, contingencies, all of that. So they're in really, really healthy shape. And they're in that shape because of the way they structure contracts. They don't do the New Orleans Saints thing, right? They don't just keep kicking it down the road and like Philadelphia does at some point, and it's kind of happening. We're seeing it in San Francisco, right? They did that win now thing, and they didn't, and now they're paying for it because they just can't afford the cash up front anymore to keep signing these big deals, and they've had to let go of all their big contracts in anticipation of having to pay their quarterback. So I much prefer it. If you're one of those who's irritated by the 3-year contract thing, we're in this position where we can be so flexible now because of that. It's kind of like when you're doing your own budget at home and you're trying to be really, really, frugal and say no to yourself. And it sucks that I can't buy that car I want or go to that concert or take time off work because I have this goal that I want to accomplish financially. And then you get there and you've reached the goal. And you go, okay, it was worth it. It was worth saying no to myself. Those sacrifices were worth it. Well, this philosophy that they stick to with the contracts, this is the payoff, is now they have the flexibility to go take care of a bunch of these things. Let me go. Oh, I like these kind of questions. Dominic, thank you for the donation. Jahad Campbell, Tyler Warren, Tyler Booker. Did I get that right? Oh my gosh. Is it Tyler Warren and Tyler Booker? Travis. Now oh my God. Putting them back to back like that, you've broken my brain. Anyway, Campbell, Warren, Booker, Mikael Williams, Kenneth Grant at 18. Who do you take? Warren. And that may seem like the weird answer because Mikael Williams is a young, really explosive, although his pro day didn't go as great as people were expecting, edge. With Hall and Mafe, they're going to have to pay him off. I'm not sure that's the best pick at 18. I do think they'll get an edge at some point in this draft. Grant is a guy that's been my go-to at 18 for months because I just think that the upside is immense. He's such an athletic and physical freak at his size. And the tape is raw, but the good reps are really, really good. Like, you can see an elite player in there. He just needs to continue to develop, and you can dream on the combination of him and Murphy and even Leonard Williams as long as his career lasts. Like, that's a big time one. Campbell, even though he's an off-ball linebacker, there are some who think if you just move him to edge full-time, like Micah Parsons, they're basically built exactly the same. He can be an elite edge defender. So I love the versatility. You can protect yourself in the event that Ernest Jones ever gets hurt. He can play Mike, but he's that guy that would be your third linebacker and just help you off the edge. And then Booker, I've already talked about him, right? And so you think, well, why would you a tight end? Because Warren's that good. Like, Warren has all-pro Hall of Fame potential. You hear about the lack of blue chip players in this draft, how there's less than 10 of them. He's one. So if for some weird reason, maybe the reason is team saw what the Eagles did and they saw what hurt the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So they're all trying to do what we are trying to do. And they're all climbing over each other to try and get all these trench players. and somehow Warren slips to 18, you sprint to the podium and you turn the card in because he's the best player on the board. And then you take advantage of the depth in this draft, and you get those other positions later on. Shane Turner, what's up? Good day, mate. I don't know. I'm terrible at accents. I shouldn't have tried to do that. I apologize. Who on the roster is your best fit at left guard? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. We saw Haynes play some left guard last year, and I think that would have been relevant if they had signed like a Kevin Zeitler or a Brandon Scherf, who's still out there, but he's struggled so much in run blocking the last couple of years that I don't know that he's a fit. Then you would have the flexibility, because we did see some of Christian Haynes playing left guard in the preseason last year, and I thought he handled it well. There isn't a natural perfect fit at left guard. Haynes played right guard in college. LeMaya played right guard and right tackle in college. To me, if they weren't, well, they are going to do something in the draft or with veteran cuts or trades or whatever. So I don't want to phrase it that way. Let me put it this way. If you were playing a game today, I think your left guard is Oluwatimi or Sandell, whoever doesn't win the starting center job. Oluwatimi started cross-training last year at guard. I think he'd hold up a little bit better as a run blocker. But it's, and then Sandell just has, I threw it out there on Twitter today. It's like, if he doesn't win the starting center job, is he going to be in play at one of the guard spots just because he is so athletic? But now that I said all of that, it's probably LeMaya. It's probably Haynes. Actually, it's probably Haynes at left guard and LeMaya at right guard, because we saw more of Haynes at left guard, and we know LeMaya played his whole career at Utah on the right side. So I backtracked a little bit, I know, but if you had to play today, I think that would be the lineup. Maybe it's Josh Jones though. He's a big dude. I like his attitude. Shane again, do you think JS made the right call not over offering Geno with more money to get him to stay and standing firm on his price, or just overpay? I think it's always smart to stick to your evaluations. If you attach a dollar figure to a player and that player wants $10 million more than that, a player who's in his mid-30s, that is not good process. That's not wise. Now, if you're talking about someone like Max Crosby, or look what just happened in Cleveland with Myles Garrett, there are some guys you overpay for. So yeah, but not a 35-year-old quarterback who's coming off a year in which his decision-making wasn't, left some to be desired. And I'm a Geno Smith fan. I think it had more to do with that, with some other things. And some of this is stuff that I've heard. Again, this is second, third hand stuff. So this is just me speculating. Okay. Don't hold me to this. There is some indication that Geno thought the ownership and the people above John Schneider, the non-football people, were hesitant to offer him a big extension because they were worried about fan reaction. That some of those above John Schneider spend way too much time tapping into what fans are saying. And even though whenever you see polls, or saw polls, he's not a Seahawk anymore, about, hey, do you like Geno Smith? Do you think he should be extended? Is he the guy moving forward? When you combined all the answers, it usually came out to some form of 70 to 80% of the fan base did support Geno. 20 to 30% didn't. It's just that 20 to 30% was so loud and so obnoxious that it was hard to avoid. And so, there is some indication that perhaps Geno was just kind of bitter and wanted to move on anyway. And as Jeff and I talked about in the show earlier, if Pete Carroll's not in the league this year, Geno Smith is a quarterback in Seattle still, and they work it out. He knew he had a landing spot there. He knew Pete wanted him. Those conversations had already happened with his agent. They knew exactly what Las Vegas was willing to pay and that they were willing to make the move. With that knowledge, he was able to put forth his demands. If he didn't have that option and he and his agent knew there was no market out there for him, Seattle would have got him on their number. I'm convinced of that. You cannot convince me otherwise unless Geno comes out himself and says something different. So that's kind of how I think that all went down. I think Schneider did the exact right thing. Now, desperation sometimes changes your decision-making process. And this stuff all kind of wove in together. Knowing that Sam Darnold was available for just money, and also knowing, because these conversations happen in the same way that they did with Geno and his representatives, knowing that Sam was out there and that he was willing to come, and also having an idea of what he was going to cost, made it a lot easier for Schneider to pivot. If there was no Sam Darnold on the free agent market this year, maybe Schneider calls his agent back. Hey, are you going to answer me? Maybe he pushes harder to get a deal done. It all just kind of fit together. Corey says there's a reason Geno hasn't got a new deal yet. He's asking too much. I'm not so sure about that. Again, I think he was given very clear indication from the Raiders on how much they were willing to pay him. It is interesting, though, that it didn't happen the way the DK deal did. I would have thought that was part of this, right? So, I'm not completely dismissing your point. I do think at the end of the day, we're gonna see that contract is closer to $45 million a year than kind of where the Seahawks were at. Tasha says, in every interview I've seen both Kubiak and Mike McDonald in, they seem to have real chemistry. I never got the feeling with Grubb, and I really wanted Grubb to work out, but it always felt a little off. It certainly did once we started getting farther into the season, right? Especially after the bye week. Like some of Mike's post-game comments, and even on his coach's show about running the football and everything, they had an awkward, uncomfortable edge to them. I remember watching some of those comments and thinking, this doesn't feel right. And then, at the end of the year, you see some of the reporting that does, and in particular, the story that Corbin Smith had where he quoted people inside the building anonymously, of course, that McDonald was thinking about moving on from Grubb at the bye week. That's how quickly and how significantly it went off the rails. I really am glad that they had Kubiak on the podium today. I thought in his introductory press conference, he seemed a little uncomfortable. He doesn't seem like a guy that's gregarious, certainly, or extroverted and is comfortable behind a microphone. A lot of these coordinators aren't. I remember Darrell Bevel, even Shane Waldron. Really, Seahawks have a history of offensive coordinators that aren't the most dynamic of personalities. But I thought he was more comfortable today, which makes sense because he's been rolling up his sleeves and digging into everything and doing what he does best. And that's football, not the other stuff that goes along with it, and getting paid and getting a job and getting settled in and moving your family and all that stuff. I really, really like some of the things he had to say. And I also like the fact that he is dry and doesn't have a dynamic personality, because you know what that means? It means he's going to be around for a while. It means even if they have a really good year one, he's probably not getting a head coaching job. So I kind of like that. Let's see. So let me clarify, because down here, so Metal Dragon says, I don't believe the report that we offered Geno 40 to 45 million. And Detail Oriented says it's been verified by multiple sources. Not sure why you don't believe it. John McGrath says, no, I heard the offer from the Seahawks was like 35 million. We'll find out what the money from the Raiders ends up being, right? The reporting that I think is being overlooked, that I do think has some validity to it, is that the Seahawks were only offering 2 years. Now, it was probably 2 years tacked on to the end of this year's, and then they would have converted some salary and spread some things out to lower the cap hit. It wasn't, sometimes you extend a player and then you tear up the current year. It's like, that's the way it seemed like it was being reported with DK Metcalf's new deal, that it was 5 years, $130 million. No, it was 4, and whatever the number was to make it 5, 130 when you add it on to the current year. So he's still playing this year on the last year of his Seahawks deal. And so they may have been offering 2 more years. We'll find out. If the Raiders offer him a 4 or 5 year deal, then we know that was true, right? It doesn't matter what the number was. It was higher than what Sam Darnold came in for, and most importantly, it was higher than they were comfortable paying. So that's where that's at. Let's see. Any other draft questions for me? Yeah. This is today was fun because it's just been like this last week. It's just been a whirlwind, right? And it's been stressful. It's always stressful to move on from players you love. It's stressful hearing people, be so negative and cynical and fighting with each other and wanting to fight with you. And man, that stresses me out. I'm going to take the entire weekend off unless there's a big signing, and I'm going to go hang out with a good buddy and watch some baseball and go to a nice dinner. And I was talking to him about it today. I said, even though I love doing this, and I absolutely love that I get to do this every day now and hang with y'all and just do this full time. I was thinking today about gosh, if I was still at my old career and all this news was breaking while I was stuck at work, I would have been so stressed, which would have affected me in my ability to give 100% at my job. And then also, not be able to be timely and react to this stuff as quickly as possible. So this has been really, really great and really, really fun. But everybody needs a break from everything when you do it too much or when you do it all the time, even if it's something you love. So definitely need a little bit of a break from that. Yeah, we just talked about this a little bit. Matthew Golden at 18, Kevin. The reason that I've been tempering people's expectations and to try and convince them to be ready if we stick and pick at 18 to pick a receiver is because when you look at the way this draft seems to be shaping up, just like 2023, when we got JSN at number 20, he was the first receiver off the board. He was pretty much the consensus best receiver in that class. And it was a no-brainer when you get to 20 and you look at your board and the highest rated player on your board and the number one receiver in the draft is there at 20. You don't expect that, so you take him. There's a good chance that happens again this year too, the way this class is shaping up. Like I said earlier, McMillan's not being mocked in the top 15 anymore. Golden is moved up, but there's some other guys that have been talked about maybe sneaking into the first round. Wiggins is one of them. Emeka Ibuka certainly seems like he'll go in the first round. If you have a chance to get the best receiver in the class in a year when you just let your long-time stud receiver go, it's a real possibility that you're going to take that player. So Burden seems to have fallen off. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe because teams see him as slot only. He is such a dynamic athlete. He's not in play at 18, I don't believe. But he's a guy, it seems like right now the range is kind of early second. Man, if you don't go receiver in the first round, which again, I just want to caution you, odds are I don't think they do. I think they go trenches. But if he's there at 50, that might be a really, really fun fit. Because you see what Kubiak did with Shaheed in New Orleans last year. And, you've seen what Kyle Shanahan did with Deebo Samuel, right? Like Burden could be that guy that lines up in the backfield, that you're putting in motion, that you do a lot of, you could do some jet sweep stuff with. Burden would be a really, really fun fit. Although I'm not so sure I don't like Jalen Noel better out of Iowa State. Kind of similar play style. He's a little bit faster. He's a little shorter, but he's built the right way. Love his route running. I'm going to have to study both those guys a little bit more, kind of comparing them to each other. But that type of player, I absolutely think at some point in this draft, they're going to acquire. Like I want more of a traditional kind of X or Z receiver, right? But that really kind of fast slot, take the top off sort of gadget guy, I think they'll acquire at some point. Now, a couple of those guys might be in the draft, right? A couple of, I've talked for a while about how maybe some value in this free agent market would be picking up someone that failed to live up to expectations of their rookie deal. And they might be looking, for a prove it deal. A lot of talk about Elijah Moore. But what about Rondale Moore? I don't know about his health these days, but if he's 100% healthy, his first couple of years after he was drafted by the Cardinals, you kept hearing them talk about, and at first it was Kubiak, about all the ways he wanted to use him and couldn't wait to use him out of the backfield and actually hand him the ball. Very Deebo Samuel-like. What about a guy like that? I think his market would be depressed because he has had some injury issues. Little bit Eskridge-ish in the fact that, he hasn't been able to stay on the field. Finished last year with Atlanta. But a guy like that, you might be able to get for really cheap on a 1-year deal, kind of give him the Laviska Shenault deal, right? And take a shot with him. That might be kind of fun too. Let's see. All right, you guys. Hour and 14 minutes. We're going to call this a short one. So what do I have lined up tomorrow? I'm not going to tell you. But let me do this. I want to let you guys know this because we got the new logo done today. So one thing we are doing tomorrow at, I believe, 6:30 Pacific time, but keep an eye on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. To just be, hang on one second here, just so that you're kind of in the know and you're ready. We're doing this tomorrow. Bryce Coots of the Hawks Zone Rundown and I, the new YouTube channel, which focuses on the NFL draft league-wide. This is the new logo and the new @ So go to, on YouTube, go to @Pulse of the Draft, subscribe to the channel there. We've done 5 episodes already. You can check those out. Tomorrow, what we're doing, this is going to be fun. We're going to go division by division over the next few weeks. And we're starting with the AFC West, as if there's nothing to talk about in that division, right? How much fun is that division going to be this year? And we're going to divide it up. I'm taking the Chiefs and Chargers. He's taking the Raiders and Broncos. And we're going to talk about draft needs. And then we're going to do a full live 3-round mock draft where we each draft for our 2 teams. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you're just a draft nerd outside of, just Seahawks stuff, then check that out. That'll be tomorrow night. But I'll have some content about the Seahawks. Certainly be keeping an eye on Twitter. And if there's any big signings tomorrow, I will react to those. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel. All the other ways you can support it are down below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Really appreciate it. Having a lot of fun. Hope you are too. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks.